Hi, everyone. Welcome to this podcast on AI monetization by Project Pro. I am Binny, the co-founder of Project Pro. Uh, in this podcast, we speak with industry leaders on how AI is providing business outcomes. Today, we have with us a staffing and recruiting expert, Shezan Kazi. Shezan is actually the head of AI strategy in global IT at Randstad. Randstad, obviously, as we all know, is the world's largest talent recruiting company. Last year they helped over 2 million people find a job, and they work with over 200,000 customers worldwide. Previously, Shazan was a program director at Gulp, which is a leading recruitment service provider in IT, engineering, and finance. And before that, Shazan was an entrepreneur running his own company, ESAR. Shazan, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me. Very happy to be here.
Absolutely. Shazan, to begin with, we're curious to kind of understand how did you kind of kick off your career focused on recruiting and staffing, and then kind of mold your way into leading IT? What was the inspiration behind that?
Yeah, sure. So actually, I never planned to go into recruiting. I was very much after university. I was very much focused on founding my own company. I had founded a number of companies throughout my studies, and the last of which didn't really go well. So I was left without a single dime in my pocket, stranded somewhere in China where we had founded that last company. And then someone from a company called S3 reached out to me on LinkedIn and said, "Hey, we have a job offer for you. Do you want to join?" And yeah, I'm very happy they did because it's how I landed in the industry. A year later, my then manager had asked me if I was up for a new challenge, if I wanted to found a new company with her. And that is then how I ended up founding ESA,
Hmm.
my previous startup,
Hmm.
which was then integrated into Gulp. Gulp
Okay.
is a Randstad company.
Hmm.
And yeah, that's where I am today, 4 years later, five
Oh, very,
almost.
very interesting how startup journey in China eventually led you to Randstad and acquisition. That's very interesting. Uh, and so as you spend your time in recruiting and staffing, what would you say in terms of the business problems that have to be solved in recruiting and staffing? What is unique about them compared to some of the other industries' business problems that need to be solved?
Yeah, I think when it comes to staffing,
Hmm.
recruiting,
Hmm.
digitalization is a tough one
Hmm.
because in staffing, in recruiting,
Yeah.
the the main asset that you have
Hmm.
is not data, it's not a product, it's I would say it's not even a service.
Hmm.
The biggest asset that we have is actually trust.
Hmm.
And trust is something which is incredibly difficult to earn, to build up, but it's very easy to lose. So
Hmm.
if you have bad processes in place for digitalization, if you have improper applications of artificial intelligence, then you'll probably lose it really fast. So the big challenge we're seeing is how do you use generative AI? How do you use predictive AI in a way that does not replace the human component in your business processes, but it actually enhances these touch points by freeing up, for example, time on a recruiter's calendar
Hmm.
um, through the elimination of administrative and repetitive tasks. So they can actually use that time to have more meaningful conversations with their
Hmm.
talents, which we don't think can be substituted by AI in the future, no matter how good these large language models actually become, even with speech to speech or text to speech functionalities.
Hmm. Makes sense. Trust, that's kind of the focus area of preserving that. So as you think through that, so what would be the core pillars of Randstad's AI strategy, keeping the context of trust and the human element in mind?
So The AI strategy that we have built has 6 pillars. The first is actually our vision of AI. It is about empowering human potential through AI-driven innovation. So it's very much centered on the human and making this human a better version of him or herself. The second one is partnering with trusted companies that we've worked with for years, them being namely Google, Salesforce, Workday, Dalpat, ServiceNow, and Accenture Song. It is about, the third pillar is about identifying opportunities. So looking left and right, broadening your horizon. Where can AI actually impact business processes in a way that fits the rest of the strategy, but also in a way that is sustainable and adds to the user experience, to the talent experience, the client experience, and the employee experience. The fourth pillar is around reskilling and upskilling. Most of what we do is knowledge work. And as such, we want to use this technology not only to elevate the level of knowledge that we have in our organization, but it's also about making sure that we use it responsibly as a leader in the industry. And what that means is AI in the future is going to cause job displacement in certain areas, right? I think this is clear to everyone, but it's up to the organizations and the companies in the markets to actually make sure that this job displacement doesn't affect their own workforce. And what we are doing is we're investing heavily into our own workforce to upskill them, to help them with reskilling, so they can use this technology to become better at what they do. That is what reskilling and upskilling is about. The fifth pillar of our AI strategy is about balancing AI and human touch. It's part of what the vision is, right? It's about empowering human potential through AI-driven innovation. It's about trust, making sure that anyone that works with Randstad knows this is true human expertise. This is an industry leader that we are working with. And the sixth part is one which is last but not least here. It's about governance. It's about making sure not only that you comply with local legislations and regulations, it's also about making sure that you meet the standards that you have set for yourself. And Randstad, as a company that has released its AI policy in its initial version back in 2019, when nobody was really talking about responsible AI, as a company that did this so early on, we now have to, of course, raise that bar as well and make sure that we continue to act as responsibly as we did in the past. Yeah, and these are the 6 pillars: vision, partnerships, identifying opportunities, reskilling and upskilling, balancing AI and human touch, and governance.
Makes sense. And if I could just double click into a couple of these pillars. One is on partnerships. You mentioned Salesforce, Google, Accenture. Could you maybe help us understand in what context do these partnerships exist? What do they help enable?
I mean, most of all, this is about having someone help you build or use / procure the best solutions for whatever use case that you have. What we've seen with Gen AI is that building certain use cases or solutions, solution designs, has become very easy, but scaling it, maintaining it, managing the change that comes with it is extremely difficult. And also, since technological advancements have now become so fast-paced, it's also very difficult to actually navigate this space. It's impossible to keep up with the new papers that are being released on not a daily, but an hourly basis, with the new models being released, with the new possibilities being unleashed. And having these partners makes sure that we don't have to stay on top of everything ourselves, but we have someone to have our backs. And that's how we see it. we are not a tech company. We are a trust company. And we have these tech companies helping us navigate this tech space.
Makes sense. And then on the other pillar of upskilling and reskilling, is it possible to share what are some of the immediate skills that you're focused on from an upskilling and reskilling perspective?
Yeah, sure. So we're launching one of the biggest training programs that Randstad has ever launched. We call it the Randstad AI Fundamentals Training Program. And this is very much about making sure everybody at Randstad, and that's over 45,000 users, making sure these people know how to use this new technology. GenAI has already redefined the way that we retrieve information, the way that we search for information, away from looking for sources of information towards looking for answers, right? But what that requires is a certain understanding of how this information is going to be generated. So getting an understanding of how these large language models work, understanding what the risks and opportunities are, risks being perhaps hallucination or model drift, etc. The opportunities being that you can basically enhance your creativity, you can enhance your productivity. But then besides these foundational understandings, also giving different user groups insight into how do you use this in your day-to-day work. Because if you're a recruiter, you're going to use it different than someone from finance, and someone from finance is going to use it differently from someone in HR. So showing them how to write good prompts, how to apply different techniques to making sure that your prompts become refined is also a part of that learning and development journey.
Makes sense. And so this is interesting. This is basically AI fundamentals training for largely business users to be more productive and be cognizant of the biases and governance, these things. And usually, how long do you estimate somebody would take to get ramp up on a skill like this? Is it 8 weeks, 12 weeks, 16 weeks?
I think you can see a lot of advancements even in 2 weeks if you invest an hour per day. Or let's say you invest 30 minutes per day today, starting today. Within 2 or 3 weeks, you will have a good understanding of how to write good prompts, what these models work like. It's more about how well orchestrated or how well designed is the learning path that you're on. And this is something we're very much focused on. Of course, we don't want to distract our workforce too much from their day-to-day activities by engaging them in lengthy trainings. But we do see this as an investment into the future, not just of these employees, but also of Randstad. So the program is designed in a way that it can easily be integrated into their daily work. But we're fully aware that this is going to mean they spend less doing other things. Looking at this program, within 3 to 4 weeks, you would probably have you will definitely have a good understanding of how to use it for your space.
Makes sense.
As a consumer, right? As someone who uses generative AI, which is not to be confused with someone who's going to build solutions on top of it.
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah. And, as head of AI strategy, you've come up with this very, thorough strategy in partnership with your leadership team. And are there specific outcomes these have been mapped to, the strategy? How do you think of those outcomes, Shezan?
So one of the products that we've built is an AI-based job description generator. This basically takes meeting notes from a recruiter, uses these meeting notes to then create a personalized and branded job description. And we've seen the average time spent on creating such a job description now dropping from previously 45 to 35 minutes to what is now 3 to 5 minutes. So a significant gain in productivity, but also we've seen that these AI-driven job descriptions consistently outperform the ones that were written manually. Now, this does not mean that the job ad generator is going to replace an expert copywriter, someone who is specialized on online marketing, knows the exact keywords and SEO strategies to pursue. But that is a section of all of our users at Randstad, right? The majority is going to be a recruiter that also has different things to take care of, where writing a job description is only a part of their personal job role. And for these users, it does have a very high impact, both quality and quantity wise.
Makes sense. Makes sense. And once you come up with a strategy at a very large organization like Randstad, how do you delegate these to the various teams to kind of run with it? Is it engineering? Is it the business teams? How does that partnership work? I'm curious about that.
So our AI strategy, or well, let's say it this way, my role is positioned within our global IT. The AI strategy, even though I have the head of title, is actually being crafted by a lot of departments at Randstad, and it's not under my supervision. I'm not managing these colleagues. I'm simply a part of that team. So we have global IT building stuff, defining architectures, defining best practices, and having oversight over what is being built globally or across the globe locally. We have our learning and development departments, which are driving these re- and upskilling initiatives. We have our legal departments that are getting us ready for international AI legislations and regulations. We have the EU AI Act in Europe, for example, but they're also driving our responsible use of AI. So making sure it is ethical. Even if that is not a hard requirement by the legislation, then we still have our AI policy and our AI principles, the AI principles being derivatives of our business principles that we want to comply with. We have data protection, which is looking at it not from a legal point of view, but from a privacy point of view. We have the security teams that are making sure the cybersecurity is guaranteed. We have the finance models looking at, do you have an ROI on this? Do you have an ROE on it, return on employee? And then, of course, we have the business looking at how do we actually utilize this technology? Where do we implement it in our processes? What are mentionable and noteworthy value drivers? And how do we identify opportunities that are going to help us redefine or iterate over our business model, our delivery model, etc.?
Got it. And as you go through all of this stuff, as an AI strategy lead, what are your biggest challenges or problems and pain points that you're looking to solve?
I think because the possibilities are so vast, it's important to prioritize. Where do you want to play? Where do you want to invest? And I once heard someone say, your strategy is where you invest, right? Defining what is important, what is worth doing, what is urgent is quite difficult, just because you have 10 people in a room and you'll have 100 use cases probably in an hour. Scaling these use cases past a pilot is also difficult, because here, especially with Gen AI, it's not so much the challenge that you have a good engineering solution. It's more about implementation. It's about user adoption. It's about application performance management and monitoring. And really, how do you make sure that a small localized proof of concept is going to scale globally? That is one of the other big challenges. We've also seen, especially in the past, we do have more control over it now, but that is model inconsistency. So making sure that you reduce hallucinations, that you mitigate the risks of model drift, that you make sure that the models answer truthfully and reliably, especially if you have users that are new to the technology, since these large language models are so convincing in drafting responses that they sound perfectly reasonable, even if they're not. You have to make sure that the model doesn't fool the user. And that was something in the past, which before we had continuous model evaluation pipelines and stuff, was difficult to achieve. Yeah, and last but not least, it's about building not just a use case, but building a business case on top of that. How do you quantify the business value that comes from this use case? Because even if you have productivity gains, these productivity gains are not always going to translate one-to-one into having more time to spend on something else. And so what we've done now, and actually some months ago already, is instead of just focusing on efficiency, we've actually moved the user experience into the foreground and say, let's use these Gen AI use cases to improve the experience either for our internal employees or for the talent, the candidates we work with, or for our clients. And if you get that right, if you can make significant improvements in their user experience, then you will see an ROI as a side effect, but you don't focus on efficiency in the first place. You use efficiency as a side effect.
That makes a lot of sense. I think at those three touch points that you mentioned, internal employees, the talent, and the customers, it's a very high leverage application of AI at those touch points when you interact with them. Makes sense. Yeah. So the other thing, Shezan, for kind of a novice like me, I know very little about the recruitment industry. And when I think about AI and recruitment, it just seems to have like very powerful spectrum of use cases, everything from, like you mentioned, the job ad itself, to resume screening, to maybe the interview process, to scheduling and summarization, all of that stuff. Is that, when you look at it from a Randstad perspective, is that how you look at AI use cases, through that spectrum? Or is there some other way you slice and dice it when you look at it?
No. So we have a broad spectrum of use cases we look at. Actually, a bit over a year ago, in July last year, we had something we called AI Week. That was all of our senior leadership and IT leaders. They attended a conference which lasted a whole week. And we spoke about AI, Gen AI, and how it is going to affect the future of our industry and the company. And after that AI week, we opened the gates for ideas around usage of AI. And what we got was phenomenal. We had hundreds of use cases that were submitted. And what we did is we looked at those ideas. We categorized them into 15 different categories of use cases.
Yeah.
We then had a look at those use cases and merged what could be merged. And what we came up with was actually 4 unique, distinct areas to play. And these are the ones which we now try to focus on most, because they have the highest impact on the business. They have the lowest risk for our talents, for our clients, for our employees. And they're the easiest to integrate into our existing system landscape. What we also saw is that using training programs to promote AI literacy in an organization, but is by itself not sufficient. what you also need to do is you need to provide tooling, which is going to support these trainings by giving employees a possibility to experiment, to explore, and to apply their newly gained knowledge instantly. So what we recently released is Randstad GPT. That is our internal chatbot, powered by Google Gemini. It's called GPT, but it's actually powered by Gemini. And we're seeing amazing adoption of this. We have currently almost 2,000 users in a beta. They're using it on average 3 to 4 times per day. We just hit our end of year milestone a week ago. And what we see is the level of knowledge soaring because people are now not just learning the theory behind it, but they're applying it instantly, and they're trying it in an environment which is completely compliant. It is completely secure. It runs on our own infrastructure. And since they now start to understand what can be done, they're actually looking at what should be done. Which previously, if you ask someone who's new to Gen AI, hey, what's your idea? What could we do? They would normally come up with write better emails, build presentations, do research for projects, etc. But that wasn't really industry or department specific. Now that they understand what these solutions are actually capable of, they're coming up with solutions which we would never have thought of. So we're putting the ideation into the hands of these users because we now can be certain they understand what we are allowed to do, what we should do, and because they know what we need to do.
Makes sense. I mean, so Randstad GPT, that seems like a fantastic initiative to encourage employees to adopt this tooling.
Yeah, we're still not sure about the name, but let's see what we'll call it next year.
Okay. And one of the things I was curious about is the use cases, which is with the GPT or LLM. Do you see the common, I guess, content-based summarization, generation kind of use cases, or are there very interesting new kinds of use cases people have been using this for that you don't expect that you're beginning to see?
Yeah, I think content generation, summarization that's going to be a classic moving forward. But what we are also seeing a big need for is actually agents which are trained or which are fine-tuned on company-specific data, not just the data that you have from the foundation model itself, but for example, we have huge knowledge bases in Confluence. We have them in ServiceNow. We have them in our Salesforce systems, which need to be made accessible beyond just a keyword search, and the natural language capabilities combined with these huge knowledge bases, they open up fantastic possibilities. We see that onboarding new colleagues can become a lot more efficient if teams deploy their own agents. If a team can, let's say we have a sales team at Randstad sitting in Frankfurt, and they want to build an onboarding genie for themselves, and you actually put the power to build this agent in their hands, then this is going to increase the time to, or decrease the time to onboard a new team member. But it's also going to take a lot of load off the colleagues that need to onboard that person. I think from the 10 years of management experience that I've seen, one of the most time-consuming tasks is always getting hardware set up. Showing people where to find what information. And that takes so much attention or so much time away from the mentor, which that mentor could actually invest in giving his mentee insights on how to unlock secrets of the business, what is the personal touch that you need to have, what are trade secrets, which require a personal connection between these two, that gets lost because of these admin tasks, because of these troubleshootings. And we'd like to see AI take care of those so that personal connection can really flourish, especially in the onboarding process. One of the examples.
Yeah, no, that's a very powerful statement. If AI can come and kind of liberate people away from the monotonous, non-essential part of it, they can focus on more value-adding parts, not just to the business, but even more personally fulfilling to them as well.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. And how do you, as an AI leader, keep updated on everything that's happening there? What are your favorite online destination sources to stay updated?
Favorite online destination. Wait, let me open my bookmarks on my phone.
Okay.
So what do I have? Oh, I use Notebook LM a lot now.
Oh,
Because
nice.
it
How
does
do you like
these.
that?
Yeah, I like it a lot. I like the podcasts.
Okay.
You do get a bit tired of hearing the ever same voices, and it tends to oversimplify the stuff. But you know, if you're jumping in your car and you need to read up on some research papers, which I'm not a scientist, so they're often very difficult to read, then putting them in Notebook LM and having them explained on the ride home, that's super useful. I'm a big fan of Alpha Signal. I use Tech Meme a lot.
Nice.
I get a lot of information from LinkedIn these days also, just because of the people that I'm following.
Yeah.
And yeah, then of course you have a lot on Reddit, you have a lot happening on Twitter. I think it's very much about the people that you follow.
And just, finally, Shezan, what do you think could go wrong? There is so much promise, so much optimism about what AI can do for us. How do you think this could go wrong and not deliver
I think
on
the
what?
easiest way of getting it wrong is by focusing on the ROI. I think that's a recipe for disappointment, for unmet expectations.
Yeah.
If you start out by saying we're going to use this to automate this and this process to replace however many man hours of manual work, that is definitely not going to work. Thankfully, the technology isn't there yet. I think we, as a society, will also need to grow into that. And the challenge is also going to be a lot about how quickly can you upskill your different teams to this, right? Because it's not only AI rookies that will need to upskill here. I've spoken to software development teams of which certain team members had never used a Gen AI. And I told them, listen, if you don't use generative AI for code completion, it's the same as working without autocomplete in Visual Studio or in PyCharm or whatever IDE you're using. And the same would apply for someone in business controlling. My wife is a business controller for Deutsche Bahn. And I, over dinner, recently had the conversation with her around debugging complex formulas in Excel. And that is something where you will have to also plug into the capabilities that Gen AI offers. So really, across an entire organization, looking at the possibilities that Gen AI can unlock is going to be a decisive factor. And this does require organizations to not think about AI as an IT skill, because really it isn't anymore. They should rather look at it as something which can be used as a tool, because a skill is something you have to learn and a tool is something you just apply and something you can distribute. And if you do that, I think, the risks aren't as big. I think the risks for countries, for big corporations are maybe not the risk, but the responsibilities are a bit grander, because they have a responsibility to make sure this gets used in a way which is ethical, which is sustainable, which is responsible. But gladly, we're seeing a lot of that happening already.
Okay, that's very well said. Number one, focusing too much on ROI. Number two, not upskilling the teams enough. And number three, AI is not really a skill, it's a tool, so it has to be distributed um, uh, fairly well to people to leverage it. Terrific, Shazan. And I also noticed that outside of being a recruiting, staffing, and AI specialist, you find time to kind of professionally cook, culinary expert. Like, how did that come about?
How did that come about? I think the reason why it happened is because I'm not as much of a cook as I'm an eater. I just love good food.
Okay.
And when you start off as a student and you want to go out and eat all the time, it's going to put a strain on your budget. So I
Yeah.
started cooking during my days in university, just as a way of saving money.
Mhm.
And I think with cooking, it's the same as with any skill that you develop, right? The more you do it, the better you get at it. And then it's just fun to see how it evolves. I think I like cooking as much as I like coding, because
Mhm.
essentially
Wow.
they're both very algorithmic. You have a base recipe, a framework that you stick to,
Right.
and then you start just plug and playing different components into it.
Right.
Whether it's, I had a keema for lunch today, which is
Mhm.
a Bengali dish with minced meat and spices.
Yeah.
And making such a keema into a proper dish is the same as I'm building a hobby project now on with Next.js and Tailwind, and building components which you can then reuse all the time with the same way I do it with dishes for cooking. It's just fascinating. I would encourage anyone to start either coding or cooking. It'll definitely enrich your lives.
That's very helpful advice. Do you have one favorite dish?
Yeah, but it's so cheesy. Yeah, I'll say it's butter chicken.
Of course. Yeah.
Yeah, that's an all-time classic, right? I wish
Yeah.
I had something more exotic.
Mhm.
But it's really butter chicken. It's a
Yeah.
benchmark
Yeah.
dish. You go to 10 different restaurants, you try it, and it'll tell you a lot about the level of or the quality of their cuisine.
Right.
But, yeah.
Yeah, no, the basics make sense. Just like in coding, right? Simple, basic code is what all of us want. Yeah.
Yeah.
Terrific. Shezan, thank you so much. It was a pleasure talking to you. Very, very insightful perspective on AI and recruiting. Thanks for your time.
Thanks for having me.